And yeah, first of all, it's curious for me. We say in Bulgarian, in Russian, and in German, we say Near East, and the English say Middle East. How do you call it in Swedish?
We call it the Middle East. And the reason is, of course, that there was a Near East. We are now in the Near East. I mean, traditionally what we call the Balkans was the Near East. And then was the Middle East. And then there was the Far East. But the Near East is part of Europe. The Middle East is our immediate neighbor. And what we see happening now throughout the Arab world is undoubtedly the most momentous transformation of our part of the world since the dissolution of the Soviet Empire and the fall of the Soviet Union. You might argue one of the most important and critically one of the most important developments on the global scale. It's popular to try to see what similarities are there with what happened 20, 25 years in Central and Eastern Europe and in the Near East as well. Well, there are similarities in the sense that, and that is sometimes forgotten, things played out over a fairly long time. It wasn't just one big bang in Central Europe. It was an extended process that lasted for quite some time. You can say from 1989, 90, until they acceded to the European Union, be that 2004 or 2007, a prolonged period of democratic and economic transformation of these societies. Challenges were enormous. There was an economic and social collapse that was associated with the collapse of the Soviet system. One system that was decaying did collapse, and it took some time for the other system to rise out of the ruins of the old. There was also the failures, notably here in the Near East, where we saw ethnic and religious and cultural divisions that were there and had been contained by autocratic systems for a long time, explode into a decade of violence in a part of Europe that should not be forgotten when we discuss the success of the rest of the transformation. But most notably, at the end of the day, it turned out to be a magnificent success. The big advantage that was here, of course, was, I'm coming now from 2 days in Poland, what was called the return to Europe. That was the model of the European Union, that was the magnetism of the European Union, there was a vision of a shared past that it was a question of returning to, and that gave it the possibility and the endurance to go through all of the challenges and all of the difficulties. That is clearly not there. And that is the big difference, of course, with what is happening in the Arab world. Neither can we, from the European side, try to dictate anything to these countries. I mean, Egypt has a history that is far longer than any European country can even dream of. Not even the Greeks are coming in the vicinity of that long historical tradition. The Arab countries will have to find their own visions of where they want to go. But I think it is exceedingly important that they have that vision so that they know where they are heading with their revolutions of democracy and dignity. We now talk about the democratic revolution, but I'd like to spend a couple of seconds anyhow on the demographic explosion that is there to the south of the Mediterranean. These are young populations, and they are populations that are growing very fast. There were in 1980, not that long ago, 150 million people living in the Arab world. There is within a couple of years going to be 400 million people living there. It is the most rapid increase of population that we find anywhere in the world at the moment. And we see this expressed in the figures. 60% of the populations are under 25 years of age. And the fact that the economies have been developing slowly means that unemployment is high. Roughly up to 30%, if I look at the figures now, is likely to be the youth unemployment in Egypt and Tunisia during these years. And if we go to people who have, we talked about education, is bad, it has improved somewhat during the last 10 years. But when you educate yourself high school or university in these countries, you are more likely to be unemployed due to the nature of the economies. Unemployment among the higher educated is well above 40% in most of these countries. And what's happened is, of course, that has been driving the rebellion to a very large extent, the democratic rebellion. It was a revolution of rising expectations from people who saw the possibility, but saw that they were prevented from utilizing them or benefiting from them due to the nature of the societies. The danger that is, of course, there is that the revolution of rising expectations today will turn into the revolution of failed expectations 5 or 10 years down the road if the economic and social issues are not addressed with decisive policies. And that's going to be demanding, because we now see social demands increasing, wage increases, subsidies. We see food and fuel prices soaring. We see tourism collapsing. If you look at the GDP numbers of Egypt and Tunisia now, they are horrifying. So there's an immediate economic and social crisis that needs to be addressed in the middle of the political transformation. If that does not succeed, the immediate crisis and the long-term crisis problems will occur. So what then can we do? What can Europe offer? Well, no models, but lessons. There are lessons from mistakes done in Bulgaria, in Poland, in Latvia, in what used to be the German Democratic Republic. And I say mistakes because we shouldn't say that everything was perfect. Mankind learns primarily by its mistakes. And we should look at the mistakes made in order to avoid them when it comes to what happens in the individual countries, difficult as they are. We should mobilize our political parties to develop links throughout their worlds, to learn the simple art of campaigning and financing and those sorts of things that look easy on paper, but are somewhat more difficult in practice. We must help in overcoming the immediate financial crisis. I don't see any other solution but the IMF to come in and help these countries. And if IMF comes in, then, as we've done in other cases, you can have the European Union, you can have the United States, and you should have the Gulf states coming in and helping with money as well. Don't forget that one of the results, that's primarily of Libya, is oil prices going up 15%. That's billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars going into the oil-producing Arab states, and some of that should help the oil-importing Arab states when we help as well, and that is necessary. That is also going to be important in order to gain the credibility of the markets, in order to get investments going, domestic capital and international capital. The fact that we have this youth explosion there is a problematic thing short term, but an enormous opportunity, of course, long term. This is an investment opportunity for the global markets when the conditions are right, but the conditions needs to be right both in political terms and in financial terms. From the European side, needless to say, we should open up our trade possibilities for these countries. But let's be honest, a lot of these countries are not competitive, even if we open up the trade, because markets are so restrictive, the economies are so bureaucratic, corruption is so rampant that they are not sufficiently competitive. They need a lot of structural reforms of their labor market, of their bureaucratic systems, of their too rigid state structures in order to become competitive. But we should clearly offer them free trade area, already done in Barcelona in 1995, but not really implemented, primarily because it wasn't wished by the countries themselves, by the way, because it is rather demanding. I think we should be prepared to offer what we are now negotiating, say, with Ukraine, deep and comprehensive free trade. And I think we should look at and offer them membership of the customs union of the European Union. That's not an easy thing. But look at what happened when Turkey was given the possibility to enter the customs union in 1996. It dramatically took down trade barriers between Turkey and the rest of the world. It dramatically increased competitive pressures in the Turkish economy. It dramatically drove economic reforms. And today, Turkey is one of the growth leaders. It is the growth leader in Europe. It is one of the growth leaders on the global stage due to these things. And what happened then is that investments start to flow into that particular country, and that generates jobs, and that generates employment opportunities. Today we have a situation, not that Turks are moving to Germany, but there are more people, as a matter of fact, moving from Germany to Turkey than the other way around, due to what we've seen during the last 10 years. So this we need to do, and we need to do it, see it in the longer time perspective. This is a transition, an evolution, a change that will play out over the next 10 or 15 years. But it must handle both the immediate political transition, the immediate financial crisis, set the framework for the long-term reforms, then the problems that are now, to a certain extent, the figures that we see from the demographic explosion will turn into a demographic dividend, which will strengthen the democratic evolution of these countries and also provides great opportunities, not only for these countries, but also, let's be honest, for Europe as well. We have a deep interest in this. It's an opportunity for us that is great.
Thank you very much for this vision in demography and democracy.